In a quiet retirement community in Florida, what started as simple intimidation turned into one of the most extraordinary stories of courage and transformation. When the notorious Steel Wolves motorcycle gang thought they'd found an easy target in Pine Valley retirement community, they never expected to encounter Frank Martinez, a decorated Marine Force recon instructor who would teach them the true meaning of strength. This is the incredible true story of how one veteran turned a gang of violent bikers into protectors of the law, proving that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with wisdom. Before we dive into today's story, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoy what you see, hit that subscribe button. We'll be back tomorrow with another story you won't want to miss. The morning sun had barely risen over Pine Valley retirement community when the first sounds of motorcycles shattered the peace. Frank Martinez looked up from his roses, his weathered hands steady as they held the pruning shears. At 68, his military bearing remained unchanged, straight-backed, alert, and ready. 3 decades of training elite Marines had taught him to read situations instantly, and this one spelled trouble. "Frank, they're back again." Martha Wilson's trembling voice carried across the perfectly manicured lawns separating their homes. The 82-year-old widow clutched her morning paper like a shield. They were circling the community center last night. Mrs. Henderson said they broke all the windows. Frank carefully set down his shears. "Get inside, Martha. Lock your door." His voice carried the quiet authority that had once commanded Special Forces units. As Martha hurried inside, Frank remained in his garden, seemingly absorbed in his roses, but cataloguing every detail of his surroundings: escape routes, potential weapons, and defensible positions. Old habits died hard. The motorcycles grew louder. 5 bikes roared past his house, then circled back. Their leather jackets bore the snarling wolf emblem of the Steel Wolves, a gang that had been terrorizing local communities for months. They stopped at the end of Frank's driveway, cutting their engines. The leader, a massive man with a graying beard and arms covered in military tattoos, dismounted first. "Nice flowers, old-timer." The leader's voice carried deliberate menace as he walked toward Frank. Shame if something happened to them. He kicked over a potted plant, sending soil and flowers scattering across the path. Frank straightened slowly, his movements deliberate. "That was a prize-winning hybrid tea rose. Mrs. Chen from Unit 6 gave me that cutting last spring." He brushed the dirt from his hands. "You'll want to clean that up." The gang leader, Frank had already noticed the name Hammer stitched on his vest, laughed. "Yeah? Who's going to make me you, Grandpa?" Frank's eyes flickered to Hammer's forearm. "3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, Iraq." The question caught Hammer off guard. "I recognize the tattoo. When did you serve?" "That's none of your business, old man." But Hammer's voice had lost some of its edge. "I spent 30 years training Marines just like you. Taught them how to survive in combat, how to protect the innocent." Frank's voice remained calm. "Never thought I'd see one of them falling so far from those values." Hammer's face darkened. "Times change, old man. This is our territory now. We're going to set up our new clubhouse right here in this quiet little community. All these rich retirees are going to pay us for protection, whether they want to or not." "That's not going to happen." Frank's voice carried the same tone he'd used instructing young Marines, firm and unwavering. "No?" Hammer gestured to his men, who began spreading out around Frank's garden. "And who's going to stop us? You?" "I already have." Frank smiled slightly. "You didn't notice the cameras I installed last week, or the fact that I've been documenting your activities. 3 break-ins, 5 acts of vandalism, and dozens of threats, all recorded and sent to some very interested parties in law enforcement." One of the younger bikers stepped forward, reaching into his jacket. Hammer held up his hand, studying Frank with new wariness. "You're bluffing, old man. Marine Force Recon doesn't bluff." Frank stepped closer to Hammer, his voice dropping. "You've forgotten what that tattoo means. The honor, the duty to protect. I'm going to help you remember." "Is that right?" Hammer's laugh was forced. "How exactly do you plan to do that?" "By giving you a choice. Leave now, never come back, and those files stay private. Or stay, and learn why testing a Marine combat instructor might be the last mistake this gang ever makes." A tense silence fell over the garden. The other bikers looked to their leader, waiting. Hammer's face worked through several emotions: anger, uncertainty, and something else. Recognition, perhaps, of the man he used to be. "You've got some nerve, old man," Hammer finally spoke. "But this isn't over." "No," Frank agreed. "It's just beginning. I'll be waiting when you come back, and I'll be ready." The bikers roared away, leaving Frank's roses scattered across the ground. He knelt to gather the broken flowers, his mind already planning. He knew they would return. Wounded pride guaranteed that. But when they did, they'd find more than just one old Marine waiting for them. Inside his house, Frank opened his laptop and began typing emails, first to his old Marine Corps contacts, men who owed him favors from years of service, then to the other veterans in Pine Valley. There were more than a few. Finally to his former student, who now commanded the local police tactical unit. "They're coming back," Martha called from next door. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to teach them what real strength looks like." Frank's fingers moved across the keyboard, and maybe save them in the process. The phone rang. It was the police chief returning his call. "Martinez, got your message. You sure about this?" Absolutely. Frank watched another group of motorcycles cruise past his window. Time to show these boys the difference between thugs and warriors. Frank spent the next 3 days preparing Pine Valley for what he knew was coming. The residents watched from behind their curtains as he moved with purpose around the community, his actions calculated and precise. Some thought the old Marine had finally lost his mind, but others recognized the look in his eyes, the same one they'd seen in their husbands and sons before deployment. "You really think they'll come back?" Tom Jenkins, another resident and Vietnam veteran, helped Frank install a hidden camera near the community center. At 75, Tom's hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but his eyes missed nothing. "Count on it," Frank replied, adjusting the angle. "Men like that can't handle being challenged, especially not by someone they see as weak." He checked his phone, showing Tom the footage from other cameras he'd already placed. "When they do, we'll be ready." "Got room for one more in this operation?" Tom pulled aside his jacket, revealing a Marine Corps tattoo faded with age. Some fights you can't walk away from. Before Frank could respond, the roar of motorcycles filled the air, but these weren't the Steel Wolves. 3 bikes pulled up, their riders wearing different colors. The lead rider, a woman in her 40s with close-cropped grey hair, dismounted first. "Sarah Martinez!" Frank smiled, embracing his daughter. "I knew you'd come. Did you think I'd let my old man have all the fun?" Sarah, a former MP, turned to her companions. "This is Rico and Marcus. We served together. When you called about some bikers causing trouble, well," she shrugged, "let's just say we were overdue for a reunion." Inside Frank's house, the group gathered around his dining room table, now covered with maps and surveillance photos. Sarah studied the gang members' faces on Frank's laptop screen. "You're sure about their leader? Former Marine?" Frank nodded. "Hammer. His real name's James Cooper. 3 tours in Iraq with the 3/5ths. Something happened over there. He came back different, started running with the wrong crowd, and now he's targeting retirees." Marcus shook his head. "How many in his crew?" 15 regular members, maybe 10 more associates. They've been working their way through retirement communities in 3 counties. Move in, intimidate residents, demand protection money. Local cops are either scared or bought off. A knock at the door interrupted them. Frank checked the security camera feed before opening it. Mrs. Henderson stood there, wringing her hands. "Frank, they took them. My Henry's medals. They broke in while I was at bingo." Tears streamed down her face. "Those medals were all I had left of him." Sarah watched her father's expression darken. She'd seen that look before, right before he taught her most important lessons about justice and honor. "Tell me everything," Frank said, leading Mrs. Henderson to a chair. "Every detail." As Mrs. Henderson described the break-in, more residents began arriving. Each had a story: broken windows, slashed tires, threatening notes. The Steel Wolves had been busy marking their territory. "They think fear will control us," Frank addressed the gathered residents. But they forgot something important. This isn't just a retirement community. It's a community of warriors, of survivors, and we protect our own. Tom Jenkins stood up. I've got my old radio equipment in the basement. We can set up a command center, coordinate communications. My grandson's on the SWAT team, another resident offered. One call, he'll be here with his whole unit. The energy in the room shifted from fear to determination. These weren't helpless victims. They were veterans, military spouses, people who'd faced worse odds and prevailed. Frank's phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. Midnight tomorrow. Better have our protection money ready, old man, all of you. They're planning something big. Sarah studied the message, testing us, seeing how we'll react. Frank smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good. Let them come. But first, we need to understand exactly who we're dealing with. He turned to Rico. Think you can still access military personnel records? Rico cracked his knuckles. Give me an hour with their names. I'll tell you everything about these guys. Service records, discharge details, the works. Mrs. Henderson, Frank called. I'm going to need a list of everyone who served, their specialties. Time to remind these boys what happens when you pick a fight with veterans. The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Tom set up his radio equipment in Frank's basement, creating a communication network throughout Pine Valley. Sarah and her team began training residents in basic security protocols. Frank worked the phones, calling in favors from decades of service. As evening fell, the community had been transformed. Hidden cameras covered every approach. Veterans were stationed at strategic points. Communication channels were open, and every resident knew their role in what was coming. They think we're weak, Frank told the gathered residents. They see grey hair and walkers and think we're easy targets. Tomorrow night, they learn how wrong they are. What if they're armed? Someone asked. They will be, Frank replied. But our weapons are better. Experience, strategy, and the one thing they've forgotten. Honor. Later that night, Frank sat alone on his porch watching the streets. Sarah joined him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She asked, handing him a cup. Not enjoying, but maybe. He paused, considering. Maybe this is why I'm still here. These people need protection, and those boys need direction. Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to turn your enemies into allies. You think you can turn them? They're criminals, Dad. They're lost. Hammer especially. I saw it in his eyes. He remembers who he used to be. Sometimes people just need someone to remind them of their own honor. Another motorcycle roared past, deliberately loud, a warning, a challenge. Get some sleep, Frank told his daughter. Tomorrow we remind them what real warriors look like. As Sarah left, Frank checked his phone one last time. Messages from police contacts, military buddies, even a few former students now in high places. Everything was ready. Come on, Hammer, he whispered to the night. Let's see if you remember what that Marine Corps tattoo really means. Midnight approached like a gathering storm. The streets of Pine Valley were silent, but behind closed doors, veterans and residents moved with practiced precision. Frank watched from his security feeds as the first motorcycles appeared at the community's entrance. Just scouts testing the perimeter. Alpha Team, report. Frank's voice was barely a whisper into his radio. 3 bikes at the north gate. Tom Jenkins responded. 2 more circling the back entrance. They're splitting up, Sarah added from her position. I count 15, no, 18 bikes total, more than we expected. Frank nodded to himself. Hammer was bringing in reinforcements, trying to overwhelm them with numbers. Predictable. Amateur. In his basement command center, Frank toggled between camera feeds, watching the steel wolves spread through the community like a dark tide. Got eyes on Hammer, Rico's voice crackled through the radio. He's got something in his hand. Looks like... Wait, those are Mrs. Henderson's medals. Frank's jaw tightened, using the medals as bait, another predictable move. He watched as Hammer and his core group rolled to a stop in front of the community center. The gang leader's voice boomed through the quiet night. Come out, old-timer! Time to talk about Pine Valley's new management. Frank took a deep breath, checking his preparations one final time. Every camera was recording. Police units were staged 3 blocks away. Veterans were in position. He stepped out of his house, moving with deliberate slowness into the street. Kind of late for a community meeting, isn't it? Frank's voice carried clearly across the distance. Hammer dangled the medals, letting them catch the streetlight. Brought you a present, figured these meant something to somebody. He grinned. Shame if they got lost permanently. Frank walked closer, apparently alone and vulnerable. But in windows and doorways, behind cars and bushes, dozens of eyes watched. Veterans with radios, residents with cameras, all waiting for his signal. "Those medals belong to a widow's husband," Frank said. "He earned them in Vietnam, saving his entire platoon. They're his legacy." "Legacy?" Hammer spat. "Legacy is power, strength, like what we're about to show this whole community." More bikes roared up, surrounding Frank. He counted quietly. 25 now. More than expected, but not unmanageable. He noticed something else too. Some of the riders looked nervous, uncertain. They'd expected to intimidate helpless seniors, not face down a Marine who showed no fear. "You know what your problem is, Hammer?" Frank's voice took on the tone he'd used training recruits. "You forgot the difference between intimidation and strength, between thugs and warriors." "Shut up, old man." But there was a flicker of something in Hammer's eyes. Recognition. Memory. "Tell me something," Frank continued, walking slowly around the circle of bikes. "That night in Fallujah, when your unit was pinned down, who was it that carried your wounded brother Marines to safety?" Hammer's face went white. "How did you?" 3 silver stars for valor, citations for bravery under fire. You saved 12 men that night." Frank's words cut through the darkness. The man who did that, he wouldn't be stealing medals from widows. Some of the bikers shifted uncomfortably. Frank noticed a few exchanging glances, seeds of doubt already growing. "That was a different life," Hammer growled, but his voice had lost its edge. "No, that's who you really are. This," Frank gestured at the gang colors, the intimidation display. "This is the disguise you're wearing. A costume, pretending to be something you're not." "Enough!" Hammer revved his engine. "Boys, show this old-timer what happens when you threaten a Marine combat instructor." Frank smiled. "About that?" He raised his hand. Suddenly, red laser dots appeared on every biker's chest. The veterans Tom had positioned revealed themselves, covering every angle with cameras and lights. Sarah's team emerged from the shadows, blocking escape routes. "See, while you were busy trying to scare old folks, I made some calls." Frank kept his voice calm and reasonable. "Those are Navy SEALs on the roof, Force Recon by the gates, Army Rangers in the shadows, all combat veterans, all very interested in meeting the gang that's been terrorizing their parents and grandparents." The bikers froze. Some raised their hands instinctively, others looked to Hammer, who sat rigid on his bike, the medals hanging forgotten from his fist. "But that's not the interesting part," Frank continued. "The interesting part is what I found in your military records, particularly that night in Fallujah. The men you saved, one of them was my godson." The revelation hit Hammer like a physical blow. His face drained of color as recognition dawned. "Master Sergeant Martinez," he whispered. You were the one who trained our combat instructors." "Still am, in a way." Frank stepped closer. "And right now I'm trying to save one more Marine from making the biggest mistake of his life." The tension in the air was electric. 25 bikers, dozens of hidden veterans, and one old Marine instructor standing in the middle of it all. A situation balanced on a knife's edge. "Last chance, James." Frank used Hammer's real name. "Remember who you are. Remember what that Marine Corps tattoo really means." For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, Hammer extended his hand, offering Mrs. Henderson's medals to Frank. Hammer's voice cracked. "I forgot. Somewhere along the way, I forgot everything they taught us." "No," Frank took the medals gently. "You just lost your way. But Marines, we never leave our own behind, not in combat, not in life." The night had one more surprise in store. As if on cue, police lights flooded the street. But instead of moving in, they just waited, watching. Frank had orchestrated this too, showing the gang they were surrounded but offering a choice. "So what happens now?" one of the younger bikers asked. Frank looked at Hammer, seeing not the gang leader but the Marine he used to be, the Marine he could be again. "That depends on you, all of you. You can leave here in handcuffs, facing charges for everything we've documented. Or what?" Hammer asked quietly. "Or you can remember what it means to serve something greater than yourself, to protect instead of threaten, to be the warriors you were trained to be." The sun rose over Pine Valley the next morning, painting the sky in shades of promise. Frank stood in his garden, replanting the roses that had been trampled days before, but he wasn't alone. Hammer, James Cooper, worked beside him, his leather vest replaced by a plain work shirt. "Never thought I'd be gardening with a Force Recon instructor," James said, carefully placing a rosebush in the prepared soil. 5 other Steel Wolves members worked nearby, helping other residents repair the damage they'd caused. "Never thought I'd be teaching Marines to grow roses," Frank replied, "but life's funny that way. Speaking of teaching..." He straightened up, studying the former gang leader. "Your men are waiting in the community center." Now cleared of broken glass and graffiti, 20 bikers sat uncomfortably in folding chairs. They looked out of place, dangerous men in a room decorated with bingo announcements and water aerobics schedules. Sarah and Rico stood at the back, watching carefully. "All right, listen up," Frank addressed the group, his instructor's voice filling the room. "Last night, you all made a choice, the right choice. But that was just the beginning. Now comes the hard part." "What's that?" asked a young biker with a snake tattoo on his neck. "Remembering who you are, who you can be." Frank paced in front of them. "I've read your files. Marines, Army, Navy, every one of you served. Every one of you swore an oath to protect. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that oath. The war's over," someone called out. "Those oaths don't mean anything anymore." "Wrong." Frank's voice cracked like a whip. "The war's never over. It just changes. Right here in this community, there's a different kind of battle being fought against loneliness, against fear, against the kind of people you used to be." The words hung in the air. Some of the bikers looked down, shame crossing their faces. "But you have skills," Frank continued. "Training, experience. Instead of using those skills to intimidate, you could be using them to protect, to serve." Mrs. Henderson appeared at the door, carrying a tray of coffee. Her hands trembled slightly as she entered the room full of men who had terrorized her just days before. James immediately stood up, moving to help her. "Ma'am," he said softly, taking the tray, "about your husband's medals, I'm sorry. What we did, what I did, it was wrong." Mrs. Henderson studied him for a long moment. "My Henry used to say that the true measure of a soldier isn't how many fights he wins, but how many lives he saves." She smiled gently. "Maybe you boys just need a reminder of that." Throughout the day, Frank's plan began to take shape. The Steel Wolves, under his guidance, started transforming. Their first task was simple: repair every bit of damage they'd caused. But it was more than just physical labor. It was about facing the consequences of their actions, looking into the eyes of the people they'd hurt. "Got another project for you," Frank told James that afternoon. They stood watching as bikers replaced broken windows in the community center. "Remember Mr. Thompson, the grocery store owner you threatened last week?" James winced at the memory. "Yeah, I remember. His delivery driver quit, too scared to work in this neighborhood anymore. Starting tomorrow, your men are going to help him with deliveries. Focus on the elderly residents who can't drive to the store themselves." From extorting protection money to delivering groceries, James shook his head, laughing quietly. "The boys aren't going to like that." "No, they won't. That's the point." Frank's voice was firm. "Redemption isn't supposed to be comfortable." Sarah approached, holding her phone. "Dad, we might have a problem. Just got word from my contacts. The Steel Wolves' rival gang, the Road Demons, they're not happy about this change. They're saying the Wolves have gone soft." "Good," Frank smiled. "Let them think that. Meanwhile, we'll be building something stronger than they can imagine." Later that evening, Frank called a meeting with James and his core group. Tom Jenkins and several other veteran residents joined them. The community center's main room had been transformed into an operations center with maps and schedules covering the walls. "Here's how this works." Frank pointed to different areas of the community. "We're setting up a neighborhood protection program, but not the kind you're used to. Real protection." He assigned teams, mixing bikers with veterans. Each group would be responsible for different aspects of community security. Some would escort residents to medical appointments. Others would patrol the neighborhoods, not to intimidate, but to safeguard. "You'll train with our veterans," Frank explained. "Learn how to protect without violence, how to prevent trouble before it starts. The skills you learned in the military, but used for a better purpose." "And what about the Road Demons?" asked one of the younger bikers. "They're not going to just let us walk away." "No, they won't," Frank agreed. That's why we're not walking away. We're standing our ground. But this time, we're standing for something worth defending. As night fell over Pine Valley, the changes were already visible. Bikers who had once terrorized the streets now stood guard over them. Veterans who had hidden behind locked doors now sat on porches, sharing stories with their former enemies. "It's a start," Sarah told her father as they watched James help Mrs. Henderson carry groceries to her door. But can people really change that much? Frank thought about all the Marines he'd trained over the years, how he'd watched them transform from uncertain recruits into confident warriors. "People can always change," he said. "Sometimes they just need someone to show them how. Someone to remind them of who they were meant to be." The sound of motorcycles approached, not the threatening roar of before, but a steadier, more purposeful sound. The new guards were taking their positions for the night shift. "Besides," Frank smiled, "the real test is still coming. The road demons won't let this go unanswered, and when they come..." He watched as James organized the evening patrol, his military training evident in every move. When they come, they'll find out what happens when lost warriors find their way home. The first real test came sooner than expected. 3 days after the Steel Wolves' transformation, a black SUV cruised slowly past Pine Valley's entrance. Frank watched from his security cameras as 3 men inside photographed the community. "They're scouting us," James said, studying the footage in Frank's basement command center. "Marcus Mad Dog Russell. He's their leader. He won't let this stand. The Wolves were his biggest allies in controlling this territory." "Good," Frank replied, surprising everyone in the room. "Let them come. Every battle is an opportunity to prove who you really are." That afternoon, Frank gathered the former Steel Wolves for advanced training. The community center's main room had been transformed into a tactical classroom. Veterans from the community shared their expertise, everything from surveillance techniques to conflict de-escalation. "The key is prevention," Frank explained, drawing on the whiteboard. "In Force Recon, we learned that the best fights are the ones you stop before they start. Eyes open, mind sharp, always alert." A commotion outside interrupted the lesson. 2 road demons had pulled into the parking lot, their bikes deliberately loud. James tensed, but Frank held up his hand. "Watch and learn," he said quietly. The demons swaggered into the community center, expecting to intimidate. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by calm, disciplined men, former soldiers and Marines who'd faced far worse than street gang bullies. "Well, well," the taller demon sneered. "Looks like the rumors are true. The mighty Steel Wolves turned into somebody's pet poodles." "Can we help you, gentlemen?" Frank's voice was polite but carried an edge of steel. "Got a message from Mad Dog." The second demon pulled out a phone, showing a video on screen. Their leader spoke directly to James. "You've gone soft, Hammer, letting some old-timer turn you into his lapdog. This is your territory, your power. Tonight, midnight, old warehouse on Peterson Street. Come alone. Remind everyone who you really are, or we start visiting every house in that nice little retirement community." The video ended. The 2 demons grinned, waiting for fear or anger. Instead, James looked at Frank, who nodded slightly. "Tell Mad Dog," James replied, his voice steady, "that if he wants to talk, he can come here in daylight like a man, not a coward hiding in shadows." The demons' grins vanished. They hadn't expected this calm confidence. "You're dead," the taller one snarled. "All of you. Nobody disrespects the road demons." "Actually," Frank stepped forward, "you've got that backwards. You disrespected our community when you threatened it. Now you have a choice. Leave peacefully, or find out what happens when you challenge real warriors." After the demons roared away, the room erupted in discussion. Some wanted to meet force with force, others worried about retaliation. "Listen up!" Frank's voice cut through the chaos. "This is exactly what we trained for. They think we're weak because we chose peace. They don't understand that real strength isn't about violence, it's about protection." He turned to James. "They'll attack tonight. Not at the warehouse. That's a diversion. They'll come here trying to catch us off guard." "How can you be sure?" Sarah asked. "Because it's what I'd do if I was them. Hit what seems vulnerable while the defender is looking the wrong way." Frank smiled. "Too bad for them, we're not vulnerable." Throughout the afternoon, Frank's training intensified. Veterans paired with former wolves sharing combat experience and strategic thinking. Tom Jenkins set up additional security cameras. Sarah coordinated with local police, ensuring backup would be ready if needed. Mrs. Henderson approached Frank as he checked the perimeter. "I made coffee for everyone," she said, then hesitated. "Frank, are we really safe?" He looked at the elderly woman, remembering how terrified she'd been just days ago. "Safer than we've ever been. You know why?" He pointed to where James was helping another resident secure her windows. "Because now we have guardians who understand both sides of protection, what it means to threaten and what it means to defend." As evening approached, Frank gathered everyone for final preparations. The community center had become their command post, with monitors showing every approach to Pine Valley. "They'll come in force," he explained, trying to overwhelm us. "But we have advantages they don't understand. We have discipline, training, and most importantly, we have something worth protecting." James studied the security feeds, his military training evident in his analysis. "They'll split into groups, hit multiple points at once, try to scatter our response." "Exactly," Frank agreed, "which is why we're not going to respond the way they expect. Tonight, we show them the difference between thugs and warriors." The sun set over Pine Valley, casting long shadows across manicured lawns. In houses throughout the community, lights stayed on. Residents watched through windows as their protectors took positions, former enemies now united in common purpose. "Remember," Frank told the gathered men, "no matter what happens tonight, we are not them. We protect, we defend. We don't seek violence, but we don't shy from it when it seeks us." Sarah approached with fresh intelligence. "Road demons are gathering, at least 30 bikes. They're armed." Frank nodded calmly. "Good, time to show them what real strength looks like." He looked at James. "Ready to prove who you really are?" James squared his shoulders, the Marine in him rising to the surface. "Born ready, Master Sergeant." As midnight approached, the first distant rumble of motorcycles echoed through the streets. Frank stood in the command center, watching his monitors. Around him, veterans and former gang members prepared together, united in purpose. "Here they come," someone whispered. "No," Frank corrected quietly. "Here we stand." The road demons hit Pine Valley like a thunderstorm, their bikes roaring through the streets from 3 different directions, just as Frank had predicted. They ignored the warehouse meeting point, aiming straight for the heart of the community. "Alpha Team, report." Frank's voice was steady on the radio. 12 bikes at the north entrance, Tom Jenkins replied. 10 more coming in from the east, Sarah added. 8 from the south, Rico confirmed. 30 heavily armed bikers moving in classic pincer formation. Amateur tactics, Frank thought. Predictable. Execute Plan Delta. Throughout Pine Valley, lights began going out in sequence, plunging sections of the community into darkness. The demons, expecting to find scared residents cowering in their homes, instead found themselves riding into carefully orchestrated shadows. "What's the matter, Hammer?" Mad Dog's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Too scared to face me man to man? Hiding behind these old folks?" James stood beside Frank in the command center, watching the monitors, his fists clenched, but his voice steady. "He's trying to bait us, draw us out. Good observation," Frank nodded. "What else do you see?" "They're bunching up, getting nervous in the dark, losing their spacing." James studied the screens. "Just like you said they would." On the monitors, the road demons were indeed clustering together, their earlier coordination falling apart. They'd expected to find targets, not this orchestrated darkness, not this silence. "Now," Frank commanded. Suddenly, powerful lights blazed from strategic positions around the community. The demons found themselves illuminated from all angles, momentarily blinded. In that crucial moment, Frank's plan unfolded. Former Steel Wolves emerged from hidden positions, not with weapons, but with phones and cameras. Every move the demons made was being recorded, documented. At the same time, veteran residents appeared on porches and in windows, many in their old military uniforms, standing calm and unafraid. "Welcome to Pine Valley," Frank's voice carried through hidden speakers. "You're currently surrounded by over 50 combat veterans. Every move you make is being recorded and live-streamed to local law enforcement. Your license plates have been logged. Your faces are on camera." Mad Dog spun his bike around, trying to locate the voice. "You think this scares us, old man?" No, Frank replied. I think it gives you a choice. The same choice I gave the Steel Wolves. Right now, you're being recorded threatening a retirement community protected by decorated veterans. How do you think that's going to play on the evening news? Murmurs spread through the Road Demons' ranks. Some of them looked genuinely uncomfortable. Shut up! Mad Dog roared. We're not leaving without Hammer. He needs to answer for his betrayal. I'm right here, Marcus. James stepped out of the community center, walking calmly into the light, but he wasn't wearing his Steel Wolves vest anymore. Instead, he wore his old Marine Corps dress blues, medals gleaming in the artificial light. The sight stopped Mad Dog cold. Several of his followers actually backed their bikes up a few feet. What the hell are you wearing? Mad Dog's voice cracked slightly. Who I really am, James replied. Who I forgot to be. Staff Sergeant James Cooper, United States Marine Corps, 3-time Silver Star recipient, and now proud protector of Pine Valley Retirement Community. Frank watched the effect these words had on the Road Demons. He'd seen it before, the moment when bullies realized they're not facing victims, but warriors. You see, James continued, Master Sergeant Martinez reminded me of something important. Real power isn't about fear, it's about honor, about protecting those who need protection. You've gone soft, Mad Dog snarled, but there was uncertainty in his voice. No. James stepped closer. I've remembered who I am, and I'm giving you the same chance. Take a look around, Marcus. You're not facing helpless old folks. You're facing men and women who fought in real wars, who faced real enemies. As if on cue, more veterans emerged from the shadows. Korean War, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq. Generations of warriors standing united. Last chance. Frank's voice came through the speakers again. Leave now. Never return, and we erase tonight's footage. Stay, and tomorrow everyone will see the Road Demons for what they really are. Cowards who threatened the elderly. Mad Dog revved his engine, but nobody moved. His followers looked increasingly uncertain. Boss, one of them called out. Maybe we should. Shut up, Mad Dog cut him off. You think I'm scared of some old-timers and their cameras? No. Frank emerged from the community center, walking to stand beside James. I think you're scared of the truth about who you are, about who you could be. He looked directly at Mad Dog. Marine Corps tattoo on your right forearm, partially covered, but I can still see it. 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. When did you forget what that means? The words hit Mad Dog like physical blows. His face went through a series of emotions, anger, shock, and finally something close to shame. How did you? He started. I make it my business to know who's threatening my community, Frank replied. Just like I knew about James here. Just like I know 7 of your men are veterans too. So tonight isn't just about protecting Pine Valley. It's about saving lost warriors from themselves. The silence that followed Frank's words was deafening. Mad Dog sat rigid on his bike, the tough gang leader persona cracking under the weight of his exposed identity. Around him, Road Demons shifted uncomfortably, especially those whose military backgrounds had just been revealed. You don't know anything about me, Mad Dog's voice was hoarse. Marcus Reynolds. Frank stepped closer. 2 tours in Iraq, honorable discharge in 2008. Your unit saved an entire village from insurgents. They gave you a Bronze Star for valor. More demons looked at their leader in surprise. Mad Dog had never shared his military history with them. That was a different life, Mad Dog growled. No, Frank's voice was firm but compassionate. That's who you really are. This, he gestured at the gang colors. This is the disguise, just like it was for James. Mrs. Henderson chose that moment to step out of her house. Several demons instinctively reached for weapons, but she walked calmly through their ranks, carrying a tray. Coffee? She offered Mad Dog a steaming cup. You boys must be cold out here. My Henry always said nothing clears the mind like a hot cup of coffee. The absurdity of the moment, an elderly woman offering coffee to the gang that had come to terrorize her, seemed to break something in the tension. One of the younger demons actually laughed, then quickly tried to hide it. Your Henry? Mad Dog said slowly. He was military, Marine Corps, just like you. Mrs. Henderson smiled. Served in Vietnam. He used to say that the hardest battle isn't the one you fight with enemies, it's the one you fight with yourself. James stepped forward, standing next to Frank. She's right, Marcus. I fought that battle 3 days ago, right here. Lost everything I thought made me strong, but found something better. What? Mad Dog's voice was barely a whisper. Purpose, honor, the things they taught us in the Corps, the things we forgot somewhere along the way. Frank watched the internal struggle play across Mad Dog's face. He'd seen it before, the moment when a lost warrior finds his way back to the light. "Your men are watching," Frank said quietly, waiting to see if their leader remembers who he really is. Mad Dog looked around at his followers, seeing them with new eyes. How many were like him? Lost souls, playing at being outlaws because they couldn't find their place in civilian life. He struggled with the words. If we wanted to change like the wolves did, would there be a place? There's always a place for warriors who remember their honor, Frank replied. This community needs protection, real protection, from men who understand both sides of the street. Slowly, deliberately, Mad Dog kicked down his bike stand. He stood up, removing his road demon vest. Underneath, his faded Marine Corps tattoo was clearly visible. "Staff Sergeant Reynolds reporting, sir," he said formally to Frank. One by one, other demons began dismounting. The 7 veterans Frank had identified moved to stand with their leader. Others looked uncertain but followed their example. "Welcome home, Marines," Frank said, "and Army and Navy." He nodded to the other veterans. Time to remember what those uniforms really stand for. Sarah approached with Tom Jenkins. "Dad, police chief's on the line. Wants to know if we need assistance. Tell them the situation's under control." Frank smiled. "We're just having a reunion of old warriors." Over the next hour, something remarkable happened in Pine Valley. Former road demons sat with steel wolves who days ago had been their enemies. Veterans from the community shared stories of their service. Mrs. Henderson kept the coffee coming. "It won't be easy," Frank told the gathered men. "Changing is never easy, but look around. Every veteran here fought that same battle, the transition from warrior to civilian. Some of us made it, some got lost along the way, but tonight we all found our way home." James and Mad Dog sat together, removing their gang patches. "What happens now?" Mad Dog asked. "Now," Frank smiled. "Now we show you what real strength looks like. Tomorrow, we start training. Not for violence, for protection. This community will be a beacon, a place where lost warriors can find their way back." "The other gangs won't like it," someone pointed out. "Good," Frank replied. "Let them come. They'll find something they don't expect. Not victims, not thugs, but warriors united in purpose, brothers protecting their home." As dawn approached, motorcycles began leaving Pine Valley, not in defeat, but in transformation. Each rider had a choice to make, a path to choose. Frank watched them go, knowing some would return tomorrow, ready to change. "You really think this will work?" Sarah asked her father, watching James and Mad Dog already planning security rotations together. It already is working, because deep down, they never stopped being warriors. They just forgot what that really means. Mrs. Henderson brought Frank a fresh cup of coffee. "My Henry would have loved this," she said softly, watching lost soldiers find their way home. "They're not lost anymore," Frank replied. "None of us are." The sun rose over Pine Valley, painting the sky in shades of new beginnings. In the community center, veterans and former gang members continued talking, planning, remembering who they were meant to be. A new day was dawning, not just for Pine Valley, but for warriors everywhere who had lost their way. 2 weeks after the road demon transformation, Pine Valley had become something unprecedented. The community center, once a target for vandalism, now served as headquarters for what the residents called the Guardian program. Former gang members worked alongside veterans, their skills and strength redirected toward protection instead of intimidation. "Morning briefing," Frank announced, addressing the assembled group. The room was filled with an unlikely mix: reformed bikers in cleaned-up leather jackets, elderly veterans in pressed shirts, and everything in between. "We've got three priority missions today." James and Mad Dog sat in the front row, taking notes. Their example had sparked something remarkable. Every day, more former gang members arrived, seeking the same transformation they'd witnessed. Frank pointed to a map on the wall. "First, Mrs. Chen needs an escort to her chemotherapy appointment. Second, we've got reports of drug dealers trying to set up in the park 3 blocks south. Third, the community center's roof needs repair before the rainy season." Got something else, Sarah interrupted, entering with a tablet. Just got word from my police contacts. The Savage Saints gang is moving into the territory the road demons left behind. They're targeting Oakwood Retirement Village. A murmur went through the room. Oakwood was just like Pine Valley, a community of elderly residents vulnerable to intimidation. They're testing us, Mad Dog said, his voice hard, seeing if we'll protect beyond our borders. Frank smiled. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. What do you think we should do about it? The room erupted in discussion. Some argued for immediate intervention, others worried about overextending their resources. Frank watched as James and Mad Dog exchanged looks, their military training surfacing. Sir, James stood up, addressing Frank, request permission to establish a training program for Oakwood's veterans, same model you used with us. Expand the Guardian program, Mad Dog added, standing beside James. We've got more former gang members wanting to reform. Put them to work protecting Oakwood. Frank nodded approvingly. My thoughts exactly, but it's not just about protection. Tell them why. Because every retirement community has veterans, James explained. Men and women who served, who still have skills and experience. They just need organization and leadership. And every gang has lost warriors, Mad Dog continued. Men who forgot their purpose, who need someone to remind them who they really are. Frank walked to the map, drawing a circle that encompassed several retirement communities. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Phase 2 of the Guardian program. We're going to create a network community by community. We'll show gangs a better path, show veterans they're not forgotten, show everyone what real strength looks like. Tom Jenkins raised his hand. Already got my radio network expanded to cover Oakwood. We can have communications up by tonight. My SWAT contacts are ready to provide backup if needed, Sarah added. Mrs. Henderson, who had become something of a mother figure to many of the reformed gang members, spoke up. I've talked to my friends in Oakwood. They're terrified, just like we were. Not for long, Frank promised. He turned to James and Mad Dog. Take a team. Go to Oakwood. Don't confront the Savage Saints, not yet. Just let them see you watching. Let them wonder why the Steel Wolves and Road Demons are working together. As the meeting broke up, teams headed out to their assignments. Frank watched with pride as former enemies coordinated seamlessly, their past rivalries forgotten in shared purpose. It's spreading, Sarah observed, standing beside her father. Like words getting out about what happened here, about gangs finding redemption. That's the real mission, Frank replied. Not just protecting these communities, but saving the lost warriors who threaten them. Every gang member we turn around is one less threat to worry about. Later that afternoon, Frank drove to Oakwood with James and Mad Dog. As they pulled up to the community entrance, they saw fresh gang graffiti on the walls. Two elderly residents hurried inside at their approach, clearly scared of any unfamiliar faces. Brings back memories, James said quietly. We were the ones causing that fear not long ago. Now we're the ones who end it, Mad Dog replied. They found Oakwood's community center easily enough. Inside, a residents' meeting was already in progress, discussing the gang problem. Frank stood in the back, listening as elderly veterans voiced their fears and frustrations. Finally, he stepped forward. My name is Frank Martinez, he began. 2 weeks ago, my community faced the same problem you're facing now. Today, I'm here to show you how we solved it. He gestured to James and Mad Dog. These men used to lead the gangs that terrorized Pine Valley. Today, they lead our community protection program. They're here to help you do the same. An elderly man in a Korean War veteran's cap stood up. Why should we trust them? Because they remember who they really are, Frank replied. Warriors, protectors, just like you, sir, just like every veteran in this room. The only difference is they lost their way for a while. Now they're home. As Frank outlined the Guardian program, he saw the same transformation beginning that had happened in Pine Valley. Fear gave way to hope. Veterans sat straighter, remembering their own strength. When he mentioned that Pine Valley's program included reformed gang members, there were skeptical looks, but also understanding. Every warrior loses his way sometimes, the Korean War veteran said slowly. Lord knows I did when I came home. Took another veteran to help me find my path again. Exactly, Frank smiled. That's what we're doing here. Not just protecting our communities, but saving lost warriors, one at a time, one community at a time. Outside, they could hear motorcycles, the savage saints patrolling their newly claimed territory. But inside, something stronger was taking root. Hope, purpose, and the beginning of another transformation. The saints will test us, Mad Dog warned as they left the meeting. They'll want to make an example of Oakwood. Good, Frank replied. Let them come. They'll find what every bully eventually discovers, that real strength isn't about causing fear, it's about ending it. The savage saints didn't wait long to make their move. Just 3 days after Frank's visit to Oakwood, they launched their first major intimidation effort. But instead of finding frightened elderly residents, they encountered something unexpected. Got eyes on the saints. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. 20 bikes approaching Oakwood's main entrance. Full colors. Armed. Frank stood in Oakwood's newly established command center, watching the security feeds. Beside him, James and Mad Dog coordinated their teams, a mix of reformed gang members and local veterans positioned strategically throughout the community. They're earlier than expected, Tom Jenkins noted, monitoring his radio equipment. No, Frank smiled slightly. They're right on time, trying to catch us still setting up. Amateur move. The saints roared through Oakwood's gates, their bikes deliberately loud, their manner aggressive. Their leader, a massive man known as Butcher, led the formation. They expected to find chaos and panic. Instead, they found empty streets and silent buildings, an eerie calm. Welcome to Oakwood, Frank's voice boomed through hidden speakers, just as it had at Pine Valley. I see you got our invitation. Butcher spun his bike around, searching for the source of the voice. Show yourself, old man. We heard about your little protection racket. Time to show you what real power looks like. Real power? Frank's voice carried a hint of amusement. Let's talk about that. Suddenly, lights blazed on around the community. But unlike at Pine Valley, these weren't just floodlights. Strategic spotlights illuminated something that made the saints freeze. Dozens of members of their rival gangs, the Steel Wolves and Road Demons, standing shoulder to shoulder with military veterans. What the hell is this? Butcher demanded, but there was uncertainty in his voice. James stepped forward, his Marine Corps dress blues immaculate. This is what redemption looks like. Mad Dog joined him, also in his military uniform. This is what happens when warriors remember who they really are. Frank emerged from the community center, walking calmly toward the saints. Your intelligence is outdated, Butcher. The Steel Wolves and Road Demons don't exist anymore. Neither does their territory. What exists now is something new, a brotherhood of warriors protecting those who need protection. You turned them soft, Butcher spat, but several of his followers were looking at James and Mad Dog with confusion, maybe even envy. Actually, Frank continued, I helped them remember their strength, real strength, not the kind that comes from intimidating the elderly or threatening the vulnerable. The kind that comes from standing for something greater than yourself. He looked directly at Butcher. Just like you used to do, Sergeant Phillips, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 tours in Afghanistan. The effect was electric. Several saints actually gasped. Butcher's face went pale. How did you... Same way I knew about James and Marcus here. Same way I know that 6 of your men are veterans too, lost warriors looking for purpose, for brotherhood, finding it in all the wrong places. Frank gestured around at the assembled guardians. Look around. Really look. Every man here was once like you, thinking that strength came from fear, that power came from intimidation. They learned better, and now they're offering you the same chance. It's a trap, one of the saints called out. No, Mad Dog stepped forward. It's an opportunity. Look at me. 2 weeks ago, I led the Road Demons. Thought I was powerful, thought I was in control. I was lost. Now, he smiled, now I remember what real power feels like. The power to protect, to serve something greater than myself. James joined him. We're not here to fight you. We're here to save you from yourselves, just like Master Sergeant Martinez saved us. Frank watched Butcher carefully, seeing the internal struggle. The gang leader's hands gripped his handlebars so tight his knuckles were white. You're surrounded, Frank said quietly, not by enemies, by brothers who've walked your path, who found their way home. The only question is, are you ready to remember who you really are? And if we're not, Butcher's voice was hoarse, Then you leave, never return. But know that every retirement community in this region is now under our protection. The Guardian program is spreading. Every day, more lost warriors find their way to us. Your territory isn't just shrinking, it's being transformed. Frank stepped closer to Butcher's bike. But if you're tired of playing pretend, if you're ready to be the warrior you were trained to be, then get off that bike. Take off that vest. Remember the oath you took when you earned your Ranger tab. The silence stretched. In the distance, police sirens wailed, Sarah's backup plan if things went wrong. But Frank knew they wouldn't need it. He'd seen this moment before, the moment when a lost warrior finds his way home. Slowly, with hands that trembled slightly, Butcher kicked down his bike stand. He stood, his massive frame towering over most present. Then, in a movement that seemed to physically pain him, he reached for his vest zipper. "The rest of you," he growled to his followers, "do what you want, but I'm done pretending." The vest fell to the ground, revealing his Ranger tattoo. "Sergeant Major Phillips reporting, sir, ready to remember who I am." One by one, other Saints began dismounting, the veterans among them first, then others drawn by the power of the moment. The transformation that had begun in Pine Valley was spreading, warrior by warrior, community by community. "Welcome home, Rangers, Marines, soldiers," Frank's voice carried across the now quiet street. "Time to start your real mission." 1 month after the Savage Saints transformation, Frank sat in his garden, reflecting on how far they'd come. His roses were blooming again, but they weren't the only things flourishing in Pine Valley. The Guardian program had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. "Got the latest numbers," Sarah said, joining him with a tablet. "We're now operating in 12 retirement communities. Over 100 former gang members have gone through the program. 86 veterans actively involved in training and supervision." "And the crime rates?" Frank asked, though he already knew the answer. "Down 70% in protected areas. Local police are calling it a miracle. News stations want interviews. Even the governor's office is asking questions." Frank nodded, but his mind was on the challenges ahead. Success had brought new problems, new responsibilities. The garden gate opened and James hurried in, looking troubled. "We've got a situation, sir. Remember those drug dealers we pushed out of the South Side? They've moved their operation into Lincoln Heights." "It's not a retirement community," Frank observed, "but it's full of families who need protection," James finished. "Children walking to school, parents working late shifts. The local gangs there are different, more violent, less military background to work with. Some people are saying we should stick to protecting retirement communities. That's what we know." Frank stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "Show me." They drove to Lincoln Heights in Frank's old truck. The neighborhood showed all the signs he'd learned to recognize. Fearful residents hurrying along streets, closed businesses, gang tags marking territory. But something was different here. The desperation felt deeper. 3 shootings this week, Sarah reported as they parked. 2 of them kids. Wrong place, wrong time. Frank watched a mother hurry past with 2 small children, constantly looking over her shoulder. It reminded him of movements he'd seen in war zones, civilians trying to survive in contested territory. "Sir," Mad Dog approached their truck, now dressed in the Guardian program's official uniform, a black jacket with a shield emblem. Local gangs called the Street Kings. They're young, hungry, no military background to appeal to. "Maybe not," Frank replied, "but everyone has something they're fighting for. We just need to help them find it." A group of teenagers watched them from a corner, hands hidden in jackets. Frank noticed how they moved, not like soldiers, but like hunters, predators in their own territory. "Different problem," James observed, "different solution needed." "Same principle," Frank corrected. "Every person wants 3 things: purpose, respect, and family. Gangs provide twisted versions of all 3. We need to offer something better." They gathered in a local community church, the only neutral ground they could find. Frank had called in every reformed gang member, every veteran in their program. The crowd filled the pews, former enemies now united in purpose. "Lincoln Heights isn't a retirement community," Frank addressed them. "The challenges here are different. The stakes are higher, but the mission remains the same, protecting those who need protection." "These gangs won't listen to military talk," someone called out. "They don't care about honor and service." "No," Butcher stepped forward, his massive frame commanding attention. But they care about respect, about power. We show them real power, not just muscle and guns, but the power to change things, to make their streets safe for their own families. Frank smiled. His students were becoming teachers. First step, James outlined their plan. We establish a presence, not threatening, but unmistakable. Guardian patrols walking kids to school, protecting local businesses. Second, Mad Dog continued, we identify their leaders, find out what they really want, what they're really fighting for. Third, Sarah added, we offer alternatives. Job training, education programs. The same structure and discipline that saved all of you. Frank watched his transformed warriors plan their newest mission. They understood something crucial, that saving communities meant more than just pushing out gangs. It meant transforming them. A commotion outside interrupted the meeting. Shots fired, tires screeching, the street kings making their presence known, testing the newcomers. They're watching, Frank said calmly as his people instinctively moved to respond. Learning about us, just like we're learning about them. What do you see? He asked James, testing his former student. James studied the situation through the church window. Young, disorganized, but hungry for something, recognition, purpose. The same things we were looking for in our gangs. Good, Frank nodded. And what else? They're scared, Mad Dog added. Not of us, not yet, but of appearing weak, of losing control. Exactly. Frank turned to address the room. Remember how it felt? The fear hidden behind tough faces, the desperation masked by violence? That's our way in. Not through force, but through understanding. More shots rang out, closer this time. A warning, a challenge. They think they're showing strength, Frank continued, just like you all once did. Our job isn't to break them, it's to show them what real strength looks like, not by fighting them, but by showing them a better path. He looked around the church, seeing not former gang members and veterans, but transformed warriors. Lincoln Heights is our biggest challenge yet. These streets need more than protection. They need hope. They need to see that change is possible. Each of you is living proof of that. The shooting stopped, replaced by the rumble of motorcycles, street kings circling, marking their territory. Let them watch, Frank smiled. Let them wonder why their enemies are working together, why rival gangs have united. Plant the seeds of curiosity, because once they start asking questions, they start finding answers. Just like we did, James finished. Frank nodded. The Guardian program isn't just about protecting communities anymore. It's about transforming them. One warrior at a time, one street at a time, one soul at a time. Dawn broke over Lincoln Heights with the sound of motorcycles, not threatening this time, but purposeful. The Guardian program's first patrol rolled through the streets, led by James and Mad Dog. Frank watched from the command post they'd established in the church basement, monitoring their progress. Movement on Carter Street, Sarah reported, watching security feeds. Street kings are following our patrol. 5 cars, heavily tinted windows. Good, Frank replied. Let them watch. Let them learn. The Guardian patrol stopped at a small corner store, Mr. Washington's Market, targeted by gang extortion for years. The owner stood nervously in his doorway as James and his team dismounted. Morning, sir. James approached, his manner professional and respectful. Guardian program. We'd like to help you open safely today. Mr. Washington glanced fearfully at the street king's cars lurking nearby. Last time someone offered help, my windows got shot out. That won't happen today, James promised. As if on cue, more Guardians appeared, former steel wolves and road demons positioning themselves strategically around the store. Not threatening, but unmistakably present. Frank's radio crackled. Contact. Mad Dog's voice was calm. 3 street kings approaching on foot, young, armed, trying to look tough. Remember the protocol, Frank responded. No weapons, no threats. Show them something they've never seen before. The 3 gang members swaggered up to James, hands conspicuously near their waistbands. The leader, barely 20, wore a crown tattoo on his neck, marking him as a street king's lieutenant. You in the wrong hood, he declared, voice hard but eyes uncertain. This our territory. James turned slowly, his posture relaxed but alert. Actually, we're exactly where we need to be. My name is James. I used to lead the Steel Wolves. Used to? The young gangster scoffed, but there was curiosity in his voice. Used to, James confirmed. Found a better way, found real purpose. Now I'm offering you the same chance. We ain't interested in joining your little club. Another gang member spat. Not asking you to join anything, James replied. Just asking you to watch. See what real strength looks like. Throughout the day, similar scenes played out across Lincoln Heights. Guardian patrols escorted children to school, protected businesses as they opened, and stood watch at bus stops where elderly residents had been robbed. Frank moved through the community, observing and analyzing. The Street Kings were different from the gangs they'd faced before, younger, more volatile, with less structure. But he saw something familiar in their eyes, the same hunger for purpose he'd seen in James, in Mad Dog, in countless Lost Warriors. They're testing us, Butcher reported that afternoon. Drive-bys but deliberately missing, showing they could hit us if they wanted. No, Frank corrected. They're communicating, trying to understand what we are, why we're different. A crowd had gathered outside the church, residents drawn by rumors of change, of hope. Frank noticed Street Kings members watching from corners, trying to look disinterested but paying close attention. Time for Phase 2, he announced. Sarah brought out boxes of supplies, food, basic necessities, school supplies. The Guardian program had learned that protection meant more than just security. Free to anyone who needs it, Frank announced to the crowd. No questions, no obligations. He watched as hesitant residents approached. More importantly, he watched the young gang members watching them. He saw the confusion on their faces as their usual victims received help without fear or extortion. "You're buying their loyalty," a voice called out. The crowd parted to reveal a young man, Ray Crown Johnson, leader of the Street Kings. He moved with the dangerous grace of a predator, but Frank saw something else in his eyes. Not buying anything. "Just showing them what real community looks like," Frank replied calmly. "What real strength looks like." "Strength?" Crown laughed, but it sounded forced. "You think giving away free stuff makes you strong?" "No." Frank stepped closer. "What makes us strong is that we don't need to take anything. We don't need to threaten anyone. Our power comes from protecting, not destroying." Crown's face hardened. "You don't know these streets. You don't know what it takes to survive here." "Actually, I do." Frank's voice carried across the suddenly silent crowd. "Just like I know you started the Street Kings to protect your little brother after your parents were killed in a drive-by. Just like I know you're trying to keep your people alive the only way you know how." The young gang leader's mask slipped for just a moment, showing shock and vulnerability. "How did you?" "Because that's what leaders do," Frank continued. "They protect their people. But there are better ways, Ray. Ways that don't end with more bodies in the street, more children without parents." Crown's hand moved toward his waistband, but Frank didn't flinch. "You want to shoot me? Go ahead. But first, look around. Look at your streets. Are they safer after years of gang rule? Are your people better off? Or are you just continuing the same cycle that killed your parents?" The tension was electric. Crown's followers watched, hands on weapons, waiting for his signal. Guardian program members stood ready but calm, showing a different kind of strength. "What's your play here, old man?" Crown's voice was quieter now. "What do you really want?" "To offer you what someone once offered me," Frank replied. "A chance to be more than what the streets made you. A chance to protect your people the right way." He gestured to James, to Mad Dog, to all the reformed gang members now serving as guardians. Every one of these men was like you once. Thought strength meant causing fear. Thought power meant control. They learned better. Now they're offering you the same chance. Crown looked at his followers, then back at Frank. Something was working behind his eyes. Calculation, consideration. "And if I say no, then we stay anyway," Frank shrugged. "Keep protecting these streets. Keep showing your people there's another way. Keep offering you the chance to be more than just another gang leader, to be the protector you really want to be." The sun was setting over Lincoln Heights, painting the streets in shadows and light. In those shadows, a battle was being fought, not with guns or fists, but with ideas, with possibility. "Think about it," Frank said quietly. "We'll be here when you're ready." As Crown and his people melted away into the gathering dark, Frank watched them go. He'd seen something in the young leader's eyes, a spark of recognition, of possibility. "He'll be back," James said confidently. "Yes," Frank agreed. Because now he's seen something he can't unsee, a different kind of strength, a different kind of power. The Guardian program had planted its seeds in Lincoln Heights. Now they would wait, protect, and show these streets what real change looked like. 3 days after their confrontation with Crown, violence erupted in Lincoln Heights, but not the kind anyone expected. 2 rival gangs from outside the territory moved in, sensing weakness in the Street King's grip. The streets echoed with gunfire as Crown's people were pushed back, caught between new enemies. "They think we've made the Kings weak," James observed from their command post, "made them look vulnerable." Frank watched the security feeds, seeing the chaos unfold. Crown's people were fighting defensively, protecting their territory, but also, he noticed, trying to keep civilians out of the crossfire. Something had changed in how they operated. "Sir!" Sarah burst in. "Drive-by at the elementary school. Kings took hits, protecting the kids. Crown's little brother was shot." Frank was moving before she finished speaking. "Where?" "County General. Critical condition." They found Crown in the hospital waiting room, still wearing his blood-stained shirt. The young gang leader looked up as Frank approached, his face a mask of fury and fear. "Come to gloat, old man? See what your better way got us?" "No." Frank sat beside him. "Came to help." "Help?" Crown laughed bitterly. "Your Guardian program made us look weak. Now everyone's moving in. My brother might die because... Your brother might die because the streets you're trying to control are killing everyone," Frank cut him off. "Just like they killed your parents. Just like they'll keep killing until someone changes things." "And you think you can change things?" Crown's voice cracked. "You don't know these streets." "No," Frank agreed. "But I know war. I know what it does to communities, to families, and I know how to stop it." Before he could respond, gunfire erupted outside the hospital. The rival gangs were bringing their war right to the emergency room doors. "My people are scattered," Crown said, standing. "Can't protect the hospital and the hood." "You don't have to." Frank's radio crackled to life. "Guardian teams, execute Operation Shield." Suddenly, motorcycles roared to life outside, but not just the usual Guardian patrols. Dozens of bikes, hundreds. Every reformed gang member from the program, every veteran converging on Lincoln Heights. "What are you doing?" Crown watched in amazement as former steel wolves, road demons, and savage saints created a protective perimeter around the hospital. "Showing you what real strength looks like," Frank replied. "This is what happens when warriors unite, when protectors remember their true purpose." The rival gangs, faced with overwhelming opposition, melted away. But Frank wasn't done. "Your brother's safe now. The hospital's safe. But this isn't over. Those gangs will be back unless something changes, unless someone shows them a better way." Crown stared out the window, watching the Guardians coordinate with hospital security, direct traffic, and help elderly patients safely enter the building. "How?" His voice was barely a whisper. "How did you turn them? The wolves, the demons, they were worse than us, more violent. By showing them what they really wanted wasn't power over others, it was purpose, meaning. The same thing you're looking for." A doctor approached with news about Crown's brother, stable but critical. As Crown absorbed this information, Frank watched something change in his eyes. "Those gangs moving in," Crown said slowly. "They've got other territories too, other neighborhoods they're destroying." "Yes, and your program, it's spreading, protecting more communities every day." Crown was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he turned to Frank. "My brother, when he wakes up, I want him to see something different. Not just another gang leader for a brother. Not just another body waiting to happen." "Then show him something different," Frank replied. "Show all of them something different." Over the next hours, as Crown's brother fought for life in surgery, something remarkable happened in Lincoln Heights. Street Kings members began appearing at Guardian positions, not to fight, but to learn, to watch, to understand. James and Mad Dog organized crash courses in community protection. Sarah coordinated with police to establish safe zones. The transformation that had begun in Pine Valley was adapting, evolving to meet new challenges. "It's different here," James told Frank as they watched young gang members learning patrol patterns from veteran Guardians. "Not just about protecting the elderly anymore, about saving the young before they're lost." "Same mission," Frank corrected. "Different battlefield." Crown's brother survived the surgery. When he woke, he found his brother changed. The crown tattoo on his neck was now accompanied by the Guardian program shield, not covering the old mark, but transforming its meaning. "The streets are watching," Sarah reported. "Other gangs, other neighborhoods, they see the Street Kings changing, working with their former enemies." "Good." Frank smiled. "Let them watch, let them wonder. Just like the Steel Wolves watched the Marines, just like the demons watched the wolves. Change spreads one warrior at a time." In his garden back at Pine Valley, Frank tended his roses, thinking about how far they'd come, from one retirement community to an entire movement, from protecting the elderly to saving the young. Mrs. Henderson brought him coffee, her hands no longer trembling with fear. "You didn't just save us," she said softly. "You started something bigger than any of us imagined." Frank looked at his roses, thinking about how growth works, how one healthy root system can transform an entire garden. "No," he replied, "we all did this together. One community, one warrior, one soul at a time." The transformation of Lincoln Heights made headlines. Gang members turned guardians, a community's remarkable change, read the morning paper. Frank watched from his porch as reporters circled the neighborhood, trying to understand how a retirement community's protection program had evolved into something that was changing entire cities. "Governor's office called again," Sarah said, joining him with fresh intel. "They want to implement the Guardian program statewide. Official backing, funding, everything." "And what do you think about that?" Frank asked, testing his daughter. "I think bureaucracy kills innovation. What makes this work is its heart, not its structure." "Good answer." Frank smiled proudly, "but they're not our biggest concern right now." A black SUV pulled up to his house. Out stepped Marcus Chen, FBI Gang Task Force, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Master Sergeant Martinez." Chen approached the porch. "We need to talk about the Red Legion." The Red Legion, the largest criminal motorcycle gang in the state. Unlike the local gangs they'd faced before, the Legion was organized, sophisticated, and deeply entrenched in criminal enterprises across multiple states. "They're moving against us," Chen continued inside Frank's house. "Your success is threatening their operations. When the Street Kings transformed, it cut off one of their major drug distribution networks." "They're not just coming for us," James added, entering with Mad Dog and Crown. "They're targeting every community we protect, sending a message." Frank studied the intelligence spread across his dining room table. The Red Legion was different from any opponent they'd faced. Many of their leaders were former special forces, dishonorably discharged. They had resources, training, and a ruthless determination to maintain their power. 4 Guardian patrols ambushed in the last week, Sarah reported. "No fatalities, but they're testing our responses, analyzing our patterns." "Just like we did in Force Recon," Frank nodded. "They're preparing for a major operation." "We should hit them first," Crown suggested, the old gang leader instinct surfacing. "Show them we're not weak." "No," Frank's voice was firm. "That's what they expect. Violence, retaliation, escalation. We didn't build the Guardian program to fight wars. We built it to end them." "How do you end a war against an enemy that wants to destroy everything you've built?" Chen asked. Frank smiled. The same smile his Marines had learned meant he saw something others didn't. "By showing them what they really want. Just like we showed you, James. Just like we showed you, Crown. Every warrior, no matter how lost, is looking for the same thing. Purpose." He turned to the map, pointing to marked Legion territories. "Their leaders are former military. They understand unit cohesion, tactical operations, chain of command, but they've forgotten the most important lesson we learned in service." "Which is?" Chen leaned forward. "That true strength comes from protecting, not destroying. They've built an empire on fear, but fear is a weak foundation. Show people a better way, and fear loses its power." Over the next hours, Frank outlined his plan. It wasn't about confrontation or combat, it was about transformation on a scale they hadn't attempted before. "First," he explained, "we let them study us, learn our patterns, but we show them something they don't expect. Discipline without violence, strength without intimidation." "They'll see it as weakness," Crown warned. "No," James understood. "They'll see it as something different, something that reminds them of what they once were." Frank nodded. Second, we expand our community services, not just protection, but veteran support programs, job training, family services. Show their members there's a better path. And their leaders? Mad Dog asked. They're warriors who lost their way, just like you were, just like Crown was. We remind them what that means. Sarah studied the map. They have operations in every major city in the state. Good, Frank replied. That means we have opportunities in every city. The Guardian program isn't just about protecting communities anymore. It's about reclaiming lost warriors wherever they are. Chen shook his head in amazement. You're not trying to fight the Red Legion, you're trying to convert them. No, Frank corrected. We're trying to remind them who they really are. Every member of the Legion is someone's son, brother, father. Every one of them took an oath once, to protect, to serve, to defend. He pointed to James, to Mad Dog, to Crown. Look around this room. Former enemies united in common purpose. That's more powerful than any show of force. They'll still come for us, Sarah warned. Their leaders won't just surrender their power. Of course not, Frank agreed, which is why we need to be ready, not to fight them, but to show them what real power looks like. As the meeting broke up, Chen lingered. This is either brilliance or madness, Martinez. Sometimes they're the same thing, Frank replied. But tell me something. When you joined the FBI, was it to fight endless wars against gangs, or to make real change? Chen was quiet for a moment. You really think you can transform the Red Legion like you did these local gangs? Frank looked out his window, watching former Steel Wolves members helping Mrs. Henderson with her garden. In the street, Street Kings members patrolled alongside retired veterans, protecting the community they once terrorized. I think every warrior is looking for the same thing, he said finally. A mission worth fighting for, a purpose worth serving. We're not trying to destroy the Legion, we're trying to save it. Just like we saved everyone in this room. The sound of motorcycles approached, not threatening anymore, but reassuring. The Guardian program's evening patrol, former enemies working together to protect their communities. The Legion is coming, Frank acknowledged. But when they do, they'll find something they've never faced before. An enemy that wants to make them allies. Warriors who remember what that oath really meant. The Red Legion made their first major move on a quiet Sunday morning. Over 50 bikes roared into Pine Valley, led by their commander, a man known as Ghost, former Delta Force operator turned outlaw. But instead of finding a community in panic, they found something unexpected. Frank stood in the middle of the street, alone, wearing his old Marine dress blues. Behind him, the community was calm. Residents sat on porches, children played in yards, and Guardian patrols moved with practiced precision, neither aggressive nor retreating. Quite a show of force, Frank called out as Ghost dismounted. Reminds me of another operation. Kandahar, 2009. Your team was pinned down. A Marine Force recon unit provided extraction. Ghost froze. How did you? I led that unit, Captain Richards. Never thought I'd see you on the other side of a battlefield. The Legion members stirred uneasily. Their leader's real identity was supposed to be a closely guarded secret. That man died in Afghanistan. Ghost's voice was hard. Just like your Guardian program is about to die, you're interfering with business that doesn't concern you. Everything that threatens innocent people concerns me, concerns all of us. Frank gestured around. Look familiar, Captain. A unit protecting civilians. Isn't that what we all swore to do once? Save the recruitment speech, Ghost snapped. Your little social experiment ends today. You've cost us millions in lost territory, disrupted operations. No, Frank interrupted. We've given your people a choice. The same choice I'm giving you now. Remember who you were. Remember what that uniform meant. Ghost laughed, but there was something brittle in it. You think speeches about honor will stop us? We have power, territory, money. And every night you look in the mirror and see someone who betrayed everything they once stood for. Frank's words cut deep. I read your service record. Silver Star for saving civilians under fire. Bronze Star for leadership in combat. Now you terrorize communities you once swore to protect. The Legion members watched their leader, sensing something shift in the confrontation. You don't know me. Ghost's voice was hoarse. Actually, I do. Just like I know 30% of your members are veterans. Lost warriors, looking for the brotherhood they lost when they left service. But instead of giving them purpose, you've led them further into darkness. Frank took a step forward. Behind him, James, Mad Dog, and Crown emerged from the community center. Each wore their Guardian uniforms, but with their military decorations displayed. Want to know the difference between the Legion and the Guardian program? Frank continued. We don't ask people to forget who they are. We remind them. Every former gang member here has found something stronger than fear, more valuable than territory. What's that? One of the Legion members called out. Purpose, honor, real brotherhood. Frank's voice carried to every bike. The same things you're all still looking for, the same things your leader once understood. The tension in the air was electric. Legion members looked between their leader and the transformed warriors surrounding them. They saw not enemies waiting to fight, but brothers offering a way home. Your operations are already compromised, Frank continued. Every criminal enterprise, every trafficking route. The FBI has it all. You can end today in handcuffs, or what? Ghost's voice was barely a whisper. Or you can remember the oath you took, the man you were meant to be, and help us show others the way home. Ghost stood silent, decades of conflict playing across his face. Behind him, Legion members waited, sensing a moment of profound change. Finally, the former Delta operator spoke. The things we've done, the people we've hurt, can never be undone. Frank acknowledged, but every day forward can be different. That's what redemption means. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly Ghost reached inside his jacket. Legion members tensed, but instead of a weapon, he withdrew something else. His old Delta Force beret. I haven't looked at this in years, he said softly. Been too ashamed. Maybe it's time to earn it back. Frank suggested. The sun climbed higher over Pine Valley as Ghost studied his former symbol of honor. Around him, Legion members watched their leader wage an internal battle they all recognized. Finally, he looked up at Frank. How? How does this work? Frank smiled. It starts with a choice. The hardest choice you'll ever make. To be who you really are, not who the world made you become. 6 months after the Red Legion's transformation, Frank Martinez stood in his garden tending his roses, just as he had been when this all began. But the world around him had changed in ways he never imagined. Final numbers are in, Sarah said, joining him with a tablet. Guardian program now operates in 200 communities across 3 states. Over 2,000 former gang members transformed. Crime rates down 60% in protected areas. And the bigger picture? Frank asked, pruning a particularly stubborn branch. Ghost's leadership made the difference. When the Legion transformed, it created a domino effect. Other gangs are reaching out, asking how to join. Veterans groups want to start chapters. Even the military is interested in using our model for helping soldiers transition to civilian life. Mrs. Henderson appeared at the garden gate, carrying her usual coffee tray. But now, she moved with confidence. No fear in her steps. Your roses are beautiful this year, Frank, she said, setting down the tray. Everything's beautiful this year. She was right. Pine Valley had bloomed in ways that went beyond gardens. The community center, once a target for vandalism, now served as a training hub for Guardian programs across the country. Former gang members learned alongside veterans, transforming their skills from destruction to protection. James appeared, his Guardian uniform crisp, the Marine Corps insignia gleaming on his collar. Time for the ceremony, sir. They gathered in the community center's main hall. Veterans, former gang members, residents, and community leaders. The room that had once hosted bingo nights now hosted something far more significant. Ghost stood at attention in his restored Delta Force uniform, addressing the newest class of Guardian program graduates. Former Red Legion members stood alongside former rivals, all united in common purpose. When I first came to Pine Valley, Ghost began, I thought I was leading an army, but I'd forgotten what real leadership means, what real strength looks like. Frank watched from the back, remembering that first confrontation in his garden when a few intimidating bikers thought they'd found an easy target in a retirement community. The Guardian program isn't just about protection, Ghost continued. It's about redemption, about remembering who we are beneath the scars and anger, about finding our way home. Crown sat with his fully recovered brother, both wearing Guardian uniforms now. The young man who'd led the Street Kings had become one of their most effective trainers, specializing in reaching troubled youth. Mad Dog, once the feared leader of the Road Demons, now directed their veteran outreach program. Every warrior loses his way sometimes. Kotti often said, "The true test isn't whether you fall, but whether you choose to rise again." The ceremony concluded with the presentation of Guardian shields to the new graduates. Each shield bore the program's motto, "Protect, Serve, Remember." "You've created something remarkable," FBI agent Chen told Frank afterward. "Something that could change how we approach gang intervention nationwide." Frank shook his head. "I didn't create this. I just reminded warriors of who they really are. They did the rest themselves." Later that evening, as the sun set over Pine Valley, Frank sat on his porch. Around him, the community buzzed with purposeful activity. Guardian patrols moved with quiet efficiency. Former enemies worked together, protecting the peace they'd helped create. Sarah joined him, bringing fresh coffee. "Remember when this all started? Just trying to protect one retirement community from some local gang." Frank smiled. Sometimes the smallest seeds grow the strongest trees. He watched as Ghost led an evening briefing, coordinating protection for 3 counties. The former Legion commander had found his true calling, not leading men into darkness, but guiding them back to light. "You know what today is?" Mrs. Henderson appeared with her signature coffee cake. "1 year ago, exactly. Those first bikers showed up in your garden, thought they'd found an easy target. Instead," James added, joining them, "they found something they didn't know they were looking for, a way home." Frank looked at his roses, thinking about growth and transformation. Each bloom had started as a tiny bud, fighting through thorns toward the light. "That's what the Guardian program really is," he said quietly. "Not just protection or rehabilitation. It's a reminder that it's never too late to remember who you really are, never too late to find your way back." The sound of motorcycles approached, not threatening anymore, but reassuring. Guardians returning from patrol, former enemies working together to protect their communities. "The governor wants to expand the program nationwide," Sarah mentioned. "Says we've created a new model for community protection." Frank shook his head, smiling. "We didn't create anything new. We just remembered something ancient. That true strength isn't about causing fear, it's about ending it. That real power isn't about control, it's about protection." As night fell over Pine Valley, lights glowed warmly from homes once shuttered in fear. In the community center, veterans taught former gang members the true meaning of service. On the streets, Guardians patrolled with purpose, their shields reflecting a promise kept. "One warrior at a time," Frank said softly, remembering all the transformations he'd witnessed. "One community at a time, one soul at a time." The garden where it all began flourished in the gathering dark, roses blooming under starlight, just as hope had bloomed in the most unexpected places. It showed that even the hardest hearts could grow toward light when given the chance to remember their true nature. In the end, what had started as one veteran standing against bullies had become something far greater. A movement of lost warriors finding their way home, proving that it's never too late to remember who you really are, never too late to choose a better path. The story of Pine Valley became more than just a tale of protection. It became a beacon, showing that true strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the courage to transform. Not in causing fear, but in creating hope. And it all began with one veteran in one garden who refused to let bullies win, and in doing so, helped countless lost warriors remember their way home.